He kicked me, right into the ribs, while I was still bleeding, still in my hospital gown. Then he handed me divorce papers. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just looked at the blood dripping onto our white tile floor and wondered how I got here. Where are you listening from in the world? Would you have told anyone? Hit subscribe. The story isn't about revenge. It's about truth, finally speaking for itself. My name is Marla Jessup. I'm 39. I used to be a graphic designer before grief rewired my entire nervous system. I lived in Boulder, Colorado, the kind of place where people hike to heal and order oat milk like it's a personality. I used to believe in starting over. Before all this, I believed in him, Preston Jessup, doctor of psychiatry, charming, collected, brilliant in a conference room. He wore grief like a well-pressed suit, just enough to look human, never enough to wrinkle the image. He wasn't always cruel. That's what made it harder. In the beginning, he brought soup when I was sick, memorized my coffee order, held my hand when we sat through the 3rd round of IVF counseling. When we found out I was pregnant, he cried. 6 years of trying. 6 years of injections. Hope losses silence. Then 2 pink lines, an 8-week heartbeat on the ultrasound, a soft lullaby that played when the OB printed our first photo. We named her Leela. I whispered that name to my belly every night, sang lullabies, while folding onesies, designed her nursery in soft sage and cream. I bought a rocking chair with cash because it felt more permanent that way. Every week, I took a photo of my bump in the mirror for her scrapbook. And then, one Friday afternoon, I felt a cramp that didn't stop, bleeding that didn't fade. The ER lights felt like interrogation. Preston didn't say a word on the way there. When the doctor said the words placental abruption, I didn't understand. Not until she said there's no heartbeat. The gown they gave me was stiff and thin, the sanitary pads useless. I sat there empty, oozing what used to be a life, and he said nothing. Back home, he paced. Didn't ask if I was okay, didn't hold my hand. He looked at me like I was the one who killed her. You never wanted this baby, he said. Then he kicked me. No warning, just force. Italian leather and polished cruelty straight into my side. The air left my lungs. The blood soaked through my gown. And still I tried to reach for the wall. I remember thinking, he's not like this. He's just in pain. But he'd prepared. He handed me a manila envelope. Already filed, he said. The papers just need your signature. Inside were divorce documents. He walked into the kitchen like he'd finished a business transaction. I lay there, silent, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me like it was the only thing left that made sense. When I finally stood up, I grabbed my phone, tried to call my mother. He snatched it away. You can call them from somewhere else. No shoes, no coat. I walked out the door wearing only my hospital gown and a pair of socks, down 4 flights of stairs. Marcus, the night security guard, looked at me, then looked away. He always liked Preston. I walked 5 blocks before a taxi stopped. The driver didn't ask questions, just handed me a cigarette-smelling blanket and drove. I pressed the doorbell at my parents' house at 3:04 a.m. My mother screamed. My father caught me before I hit the porch floor. I stayed in the lavender room, my old childhood room, for 93 days. I didn't speak for the first 7. My mother painted over the white trim with blue because I couldn't look at white anymore. Not after the hospital lights, the tile floors, the onesie that said Mommy's Miracle. I couldn't bear to be near anything clean or soft. Grief turned me quiet, but silence is not the same as peace. Therapy came slowly, once a week at first, then twice. My therapist said abuse isn't just what someone does to you, it's what they convince you is your fault. I nodded, but didn't believe her. Not yet. People asked me what happened, and I said I lost the baby. I didn't say, he kicked me while I was still bleeding. I didn't say he handed me divorce papers like a closing bill. Until one day I found the phone. It was an old phone, Preston's old backup from our IVF days. He forgot to wipe it, and in that phone was a message. Sent the night I lost Lila. Maybe now she'll stop playing the victim. That was the moment I stopped being quiet. It started with an email I wasn't supposed to see. My old colleague Beth forwarded a digital wedding announcement, the kind people make when they're too proud for paper. No subject line, just a link and 2 words. You seen this? I clicked. The screen loaded slowly, as if the internet itself wanted to delay the pain. There he was, Preston Jessup, MD, in a charcoal suit, arm wrapped around a woman with perfect posture and a dentist's white smile. She wore a silk dress the color of champagne. The caption said, "Preston and Vanessa, a love reborn." My throat closed. He wasn't just moving on. He was rewriting history, turning what he'd done to me into some poetic second act. I scrolled. Photo after photo, him kissing her temple, her hand on his chest, their fingers interlaced over a baby pink rose bouquet. Then I saw it. The ring. It wasn't just similar. It was a mite ring, the Jessup family heirloom, a platinum band with a Marquise diamond given to Preston's grandmother, then his mother, then me. I'd left it on the dresser that night, the night he kicked me while I was still bleeding. He said nothing when I left. And now it was on her finger in a photo with 243 likes. The comments were full of hearts and hashtags. Soulmates, second chances, love after loss, love after loss. I stared at that phrase. What loss? He told the world I had lost the baby, I had the breakdown, I had walked away. He told them everything except the truth. That I bled alone on our living room floor, that he watched, that he kicked me because grief didn't fit his schedule. Now she wore my ring. Now he smiled like he'd survived something tragic when I was the tragedy. I clicked save image, downloaded 3 photos to a private folder. Not for revenge, not yet. But something told me this lie wasn't just about me anymore, and one day he might try to sell it to someone who deserved better. It was supposed to be just dinner. My friend Nina insisted I leave the house. She picked a quiet bistro in downtown Boulder, the kind with white tablecloths and overpriced sea bass. I wore black. Not for drama, just for invisibility. I was halfway through a glass of Malbec when Nina leaned in and whispered, "Don't look now, but guess who's here?" Of course I looked. Across the room, Preston. In a navy suit, hair slicked back, and beside him in a blood-red dress that clashed with the white wine in her glass, Vanessa. She was laughing, hand on his arm. Her phone propped up on a little stand, recording them with portrait lighting like this was an interview. I knew that setup. I'd helped Preston set it up once for a PR segment he did on mental resilience after trauma. My stomach tightened. Nina mouthed, "Want to leave?" I shook my head. I watched instead. The server approached their table with a bottle of white wine. Preston took it, checked the label. "This is the one from St. Helena," he said to her, loud enough for me to hear. "I told you about it, remember?" Vanessa smiled like it was an inside joke, but it wasn't. That wine wasn't from a vacation with her. It was from our anniversary, the year I was pregnant, when we went to Napa Valley and bought 3 bottles to open with milestones. I opened the first one after our first heartbeat. He opened the second when we finished the nursery. And the third, I never got to open it. Now it sat on their table, uncorked like nothing ever happened. She reached for her glass. Her engagement ring caught the light. The same ring I once wore when I believed in the man pouring that wine. I took a napkin from the table, pressed my fingernail into the linen, wrote 3 words. "She doesn't know," folded it once, handed it to the busboy. "Table 12, I said. "Did she read it?" I don't know, but I watched her eyes shift just once as if something in her brain flickered. And Preston, he never even looked up. He was too busy pouring lies. I wasn't looking for anything. That's the thing about digital ghosts. They don't need you to summon them. They just wait. It started with a forgotten login. Preston and I had shared a Dropbox folder during IVF. We called it Lila Prep. Budget spreadsheets, ultrasound backups, crib options. I hadn't touched it in almost 2 years. But one night, out of pure muscle memory, I typed in the old email and password. The screen blinked once, then opened. Still active. One folder, last modified 2 weeks ago. That stopped me cold. I clicked. Inside PDFs, notes, voice memos, but not mine. These were his. Session outlines, client summaries, a keynote draft titled The Neuroscience of Victimhood When Grief Becomes a Crutch. I opened it. First slide, a smiling stock photo of a woman curled up in bed. The title beneath it read, Case Study Hysterical Collapse After Failed Pregnancy. My fingers locked around the mouse. Slide after slide, he painted me into a thesis, as if my breakdown had been a performance, my pain a clinical tool. There was even a timeline. Refused counseling. Displayed manipulative behaviors. Accused husband of violence without evidence. No evidence. He forgot the phone. He forgot the bruises logged by the ER. He forgot me. At the bottom of the folder, a file labeled Backup Contract vmoro.pdf. I clicked. It was a speaking engagement agreement. Vanessa Moreau listed as co-panelist. Topic: Healthy partnerships in high-stress professions. I laughed. Quiet, flat. I copied everything, downloaded the folder, backed it up in 3 places. One on a flash drive I kept under my mattress, another on an encrypted cloud. Because if he ever tried to erase me again, I needed more than memory. I needed evidence, and this time I had it. I wasn't planning to send it. The envelope sat on my desk for 4 days, sealed, unlabeled, but heavy, like it knew what it carried. Inside was a flash drive. On it, the keynote where Preston turned my miscarriage into a case study. The hospital discharge notes. 3 voice recordings from therapy where I described the bruise under my rib. No commentary, no angry letters. Just facts, cold and simple, like the man who created them. I slipped the envelope into a flower box, the kind florists use for weddings. Peonies and eucalyptus, elegant, forgettable. I paid cash, asked for same-day delivery. Destination, the Langston Estate. Vanessa's family home in Charleston. The same address printed on their wedding invitation. I wrote no note. Just one line on the envelope flap. Before you say yes. Then I waited. Not for a response, I didn't expect one, but for something else. Confirmation that I could still feel. Because revenge is noisy, but clarity is quiet. Like the moment before lightning hits. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the old rocking chair, the one I'd never gotten to use, and watched the screen door swing in the wind. I wondered what she'd think opening that box among bouquets and place cards. If she'd recognize the ring she wore, not just as a symbol, but as a receipt. If she'd hear my voice in those recordings and know I'd once believed in him too. And then around 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number, no message, just a photo. A flash drive on a white marble counter, a hand holding it. And in the background, a pair of wedding shoes, one heel tipped over as if someone had stumbled. My name wasn't on the guest list. Of course it wasn't. I wasn't supposed to exist anymore, not in his story. In Preston's version, I was a shadow, a sad footnote in his great comeback arc. But the truth doesn't need an invitation. The wedding was set for a Saturday in Charleston Historic Church live string quartet, catered garden reception. I knew the location before the florist told me. Preston had shown it to me once just in case we ever renewed our vows. The irony wasn't poetic, it was surgical. Clean, sharp, designed to cut. I booked a ticket the next morning. No hotel, no suitcase, just a carry-on bag with one envelope inside. The same one I'd sent Vanessa, only this time I added a second flash drive and a printed copy of the text. There's something heavier about holding a lie on paper. The church was surrounded by jasmine vines and rented silence. I wore a pale gray dress, no makeup. I didn't want to look like a threat, just like a witness. I didn't go inside. Instead, I handed the envelope to the wedding coordinator, a woman juggling menus and misplaced boutonnieres. "Please give this to the bride," I said softly. "No rush, just before the vows." She looked at me like I was delivering a late gift. I nodded, then turned away before she could ask questions. I didn't need to see Preston's face, didn't need to watch him pretend to be a husband again. I'd already seen what he looked like when no one was watching. I walked back to my rental car, parked 3 blocks away under a line of crepe myrtles. I sat in the driver's seat, turned off the engine, waited. Not for drama, for confirmation. That I had done everything I could without becoming like him. It wasn't revenge. It was an exit, a final page with no punctuation. Just truth delivered in silence. I didn't see it happen live. But I heard about it in layers, like ripples after a stone hits water. First came a text from Nina. "What did you do?" Then a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Then silence. Then a message from Beth, who worked PR at a hospital that partnered with Preston's clinic. "Whatever you just set in motion, people won't forget it anytime soon." The full story came 2 days later, from Vanessa herself. But before that, I pieced it together from whispers. Vanessa walked down the aisle wearing lace from her grandmother's trunk. Her hair was perfect, her steps careful. The bouquet trembled in her hands, though no one noticed yet. She looked like someone about to start over. Preston waited at the altar, flanked by groomsmen he handpicked to project control. The chapel was packed with Charleston's finest. Doctors, donors, family friends, the kind who smile with their teeth and say, "We're just so happy. For you both." Everything looked expensive. Curated, scripted. Until it wasn't. When the pastor asked if the bride would like to share personal vows, Vanessa didn't reach for her note cards. She reached for her phone. She pulled it from her bouquet like a hidden blade. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She just read. "You deserve to lose that baby," her voice echoed down the center aisle. "Maybe now you'll stop being so selfish." Gasps. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. "At least now I know what kind of person you really are." The words kept coming, line after line, from Preston's text to me sent the night I lost our daughter. Manipulative, hysterical, empty. No one interrupted her. No one moved. Not even Preston, until she looked up and said, "These were sent to his first wife the night she miscarried in their living room. While she was still bleeding, he sent her these." She took off her ring. "The one he gave me first. I cannot marry a man capable of this." Then she walked down the aisle. She'd just come up, bouquet still in hand, eyes forward. Victoria, his mother, tried to stand, but couldn't. Preston followed Vanessa out, stammering, pleading something about context, and not like it sounds. But no one followed him, not even the groomsmen. The reception never happened. The shrimp sat untouched, the champagne unpoured. The jazz trio was paid in silence. Later, Vanessa told me what happened next. She drove to the water, sat in her car for 2 hours, and didn't cry. She just let the waves roll in and out, listening to them scrape the shore like they were sanding something down. She said, "I didn't want to embarrass him. I wanted people to see who he really was." I told her, "You did." She asked me why I hadn't done it myself. I said, "Because he would have called me bitter, vindictive, just another crazy ex with a grudge." She nodded slowly. "But I wasn't part of his story yet," she said. "So they had no reason not to believe me." That was the difference. Truth from me would have looked like revenge. Truth from her looked like revelation. And Preston. He vanished. No public apology, no Instagram statement, no comment to the hospital board. Just gone. He went on leave 2 days later. Some said he had a breakdown. Others said he finally ran out of stories. But none of that mattered anymore, because now when people say his name, they also say mine. And hers mattered more than I ever expected. Because sometimes you don't need to deliver justice yourself. You just have to make sure it arrives. I didn't make a statement, didn't post a quote about karma, didn't change my relationship status, didn't even tell my parents. I just kept going. The lavender room became my office. The rocking chair stayed by the window. Most days I worked. Some days I walked. Every day I breathed. That was more than I could say for a year. One morning I received a small box in the mail. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized. Inside, a flash drive, the one I'd sent. A photo, me from the wedding day caught at a distance. And a note. You didn't have to say a word. Thank you for giving me the truth before it became my life. V. I folded the note twice, slipped it into the drawer with my old hospital ID and the unused baby blanket. Not everything needs framing. Months passed. I heard whispers through people who still lived in his world. Preston had resigned quietly. Vanessa never filed a lawsuit she didn't need to. His name carried the weight of what she read. Hospitals don't like scandals, especially ones with timestamps. He relocated, I think. New city, new clinic, new clients. But that didn't change what was already out there. Because truth once spoken in the right room doesn't get unsaid. As for me, I started freelancing again. Small design contracts, branding work for women-owned businesses. One client, a midwife collective, asked me to redesign their grief support materials. They didn't know my story. I didn't offer it. But I gave them soft colors, gentle fonts, and space. Lots of space. I didn't remarry, didn't start dating. Didn't need to. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in another name. Sometimes it just looks like drinking tea without checking your phone. Sometimes it's not crying when you walk past the baby aisle. Sometimes it's noticing you haven't thought about him all week. Sometimes it's knowing you still keep the evidence, not to use it, just to remind yourself you weren't crazy. You were right. The woman in lavender didn't need to speak, because someone else had spoken for her, and now she didn't owe anyone anything. Not an explanation, not a breakdown, not even forgiveness. Just the next page. And for the first time in years, I turned it. 3 years later, I saw her again. In the frozen food aisle of a grocery store in Asheville. It was a Thursday, quiet, early spring. The air still smelled like leftover rain. I was looking for a bag of peas. She was comparing ice cream flavors. Her cart held a half-dozen items. Almond milk, 2 apples, a box of chamomile tea, and a pint of mint chocolate chip in her hand. Vanessa. Her hair was shorter now, falling just past her chin in soft waves. She looked the same and entirely different. Not in that curated pre-wedding way I remembered. There was a softness in her eyes, the kind that only comes after surviving something and making peace with the scar. She noticed me first. Marla. I turned slowly. She smiled. No hesitation, no tension. Just warmth. I thought that was you, she said. You look good. So do you, I said honestly. That's a nice ring. She glanced at her hand. A simple gold band. Nothing dramatic, nothing that had once belonged to anyone else. His name's Caleb, she said. Teaches middle school science, volunteers on weekends, can't stand podcasts. I laughed, out loud. She joined in. We don't go to galas, she added, but we play cards with his grandma every Friday night. We stood there for a moment between frozen waffles and family-sized lasagna trays. Two women who'd once been in the same orbit of a storm, now strangers again but connected by a truth that had once ripped open a wedding aisle. She showed me a picture of their baby, a girl, all cheeks and curls and jelly-smeared joy. I didn't feel envy, not even a twinge. Only something like quiet pride, as if watching someone walk away from the wreckage and learn to dance. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Sending that envelope?" "Not for a second." She nodded slowly. "I almost didn't read it," she admitted. "I was in the dressing room, already in the gown. I thought it was some weird vendor mix-up." "What changed your mind?" She smiled, eyes sharp now. The handwriting. It didn't look like marketing. It looked like a warning. We talked for 10 more minutes. About nothing dramatic. About grocery store playlists. The best place for apple picking. Whether or not the new pharmacy hours were ridiculous. Before she left, she touched my arm and said, "You saved me." I shook my head. "You saved yourself. I just handed you the flashlight." She hugged me. Not performative, not delicate. A real hug. From someone who knew what it meant to be broken and rebuilt. When she left, I stood there for a while, holding my bag of frozen peas like it was sacred, letting the freezer hum fill the silence. I didn't cry, didn't spiral, didn't relive anything. I just smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need a camera or a witness. The kind that belongs only to you, because the best revenge was never public humiliation. It was this: peace, sanity, and the ability to bump into someone who once held your story and not flinch.